The hoarding shows, much like intervention and many of these other life intervention shows, have a pretty conventional narrative structure that almost every episode of the series follows. So in terms of the hoarders and hoarding buried alive structure, it's pretty much the same every time. There is a sort of perspective on how the hoarder lives. So the camera kind of roams around their homes or apartments and sees kind of the state of things they've accumulated and their inability to get around, the lack of functioning plumbing or electricity. So it's a sort of documenting of how the hoarder lives. Then they bring in family members and friends that are affected by the individual's hoarding and how troubled they are by it. And then the hoarder will testify as to why he or she wants to change. Um, Most of the shows, the hoarders express at least some desire to no longer hoard or to get rid of some of their hoard. Certainly, their friends and family want them to do a great deal more in most cases than they're willing to do, but there's at least some willingness on the part of the hoarder to make some sort of change. Ultimately, that's usually due to legal, economic, medical, or emotional crises that have developed because of the hoarding. Their house might be condemned, they might be evicted, Child Protective Services might take their children away. Family members that live with them are often in poor health because of all the accumulated dust, and sometimes there's vermin living in the house or multiple pets. So there's all kinds of consequences to the hoarding that are being addressed by the show. Kaplan points out that the show has some very clear visual conventions. There's always a shot from outside the home. In fact, with the exception of people that accumulate a lot of stuff in their yard, many hoarding homes that are featured on the show look just like any other home. The windows are often covered up, you can't see in them. Sometimes there's a note on the front door that says you can't come in. But most of the homes look just like any other home. Then the camera will roam around the house, take some interior shots of, in this case, a kitchen that is completely impassable and a stove that can't be used. So you'll get a sort of tour of the home visually. And then there's often this zoomed in shot of something disgusting. Uh, it's usually rotten food, sometimes it's mouse dripping, sometimes it's a dead animal. But this is sort of a key convention of the show to zoom in and really kind of gross you out with something early on to give you a sense of how bad the situation is. Uh, when they come in to clean the house, that's what Kaplan calls the remediation stage of the show. It's really probably most of the show in terms of time spent. So there's a little bit of time spent documenting the problem, and then most of the time is spent trying to address the problem in a limited amount of time, usually something like 48 hours. There's a psychologist present, a professional organizer is usually present. Um, they pull out individual objects and ask the hoarder if they can part with these objects. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Sometimes family members will be present and will be rather harsh towards the hoarder, and the organizer and psychologist will often intervene and mediate those conflicts. Sometimes family members just want to completely take everything out of the house, throw it in the garbage, and start from scratch. And the psychologist will frequently say that that's not a very productive way to address hoarding. And it's at this point that the hoarders start to become intensely nostalgic for the items being pulled out of the hoard. Each and every item starts to evoke this emotional response, and that's really the crux of what Kaplan is concerned with in this article. Um, Hoarders feel though they will lose the memory of the thing that invokes the memory if it's gone. So if you get rid of a teddy bear, they will lose the memory of what that teddy bear represents if it's gone. Uh, the therapists and organizers are very respectful of the individual hoarders or, hoarding couples in the cases where that was part of the show. They ask them about their memories. They ask them about why these objects are important to them in a very respectful way. The hoarder has to believe that what they remember is why they're attached to these objects. So that all happens in the course of the show while you're watching, which ends up undermining what the hoarder's claim for the value of that object actually is. Their memorializing of these items stands in stark contrast to the state of their homes. If they had truly valued these things as they say they did, their homes wouldn't be in the state that they're in. And that is what Kaplan finds problematic about the show. So here you see several shots of the aftermath of hoarding. Hoarders undercut their own presentation of nostalgia with the stories that they tell. Some of the objects that they wish to retain don't actually have connections to the memories they're referring to. They don't actually start memorializing until the sorting begins. So you could imagine they live in this giant pile of teddy bears, let's say. They don't start talking about the memories of the teddy bear until individual teddy bears are pulled out of this enormous pile that they could never get through in their daily lives. So the odds that they know what is actually in that pile is actually quite unlikely. The show, despite the fact that their testimonies undermine their nostalgia, the show makes it seem like their nostalgia for these items is part of their everyday lives. That, for example, they are sitting in their home, picking up a VHS copy of Die Hard and saying, "Oh, this is the movie I watched with my dad, and I need to keep it," when that VHS copy of Die Hard was buried under 50 other VHS tapes that they have no access to. So that's actually not the case. They're not invoking those nostalgic memories on an everyday basis. So among the clips that we did watch, the clip that we did watch, and what we're going to watch, you'll see how that kind of false nostalgia plays out.